Well, good afternoon. 1 week ago today, we stood in this room and Chief Craig announced his retirement. I think it's safe to say it was a total surprise to all of us that the chief was going to be leaving. But the city of Detroit's in a different situation. There are a number of cities in this country that are struggling for months to figure out what happens when a chief leaves. But here we've got a clear process. And the process is that the mayor makes an interim appointment, that the Board of Police Commissioners launches a search, that search ends up with a list of candidates from which the mayor picks and gets city council confirmation. There was no way we were going to leave this department without strong leadership on June 1st when Chief Craig leaves. The crime levels in this city are not acceptable, and we need to hit the ground running. While I technically make the interim chief appointment, we have worked as a team from the beginning. And so I phoned and talked to each one of the 11 members of the Board of Police Commissioners and got their thoughts about the direction of the department and got their thoughts on potential candidates. And after that, I approached First Assistant Chief Lashinda Stair, who has taken a very good job somewhere else, to see if she had any interest in changing her mind. She already has a start date. So we had to fill not only the chief's job, we had to fill the first assistant chief's job. And as I talked to the prospective candidates, I was just so impressed with the depth of talent and leadership in this department. An hour ago, I had a mayor from another major Midwestern city calling me, wanting to get a police chief candidate out of the city of Detroit. Here, we have the leadership, we have the culture, and it was a question of who would be the best fit. And I kept coming back to what happened a year ago. In March of last year, we got hit with COVID out of the blue. We had no idea what was going to happen next. We had 1,000 people in the hospital, 50 people a day dying, 600 members of the Detroit Police Department on quarantine, and Chief Craig came down with a bad case of COVID. And First Assistant Chief Stair was very sick. And we were seriously concerned about whether we were even going to make pullout out of the precincts. And we needed somebody to step up. And Assistant Chief James White stepped in and took the lead and said, I'm going to handle this. And I was on the phone with him 6 or 8 times a day in the middle of this crisis, which he'll probably tell you probably isn't the easiest thing in the world to have to deal with me over and over. But what we were dealing with is, do you have enough staff to make a pullout tomorrow on the patrol cars? What's going on with the testing? How many officers are quarantined today? And because of the fact we had 1,000 people in the hospital and people dying literally on gurneys and hallways, the Detroit Police Department had to break up the gatherings in the city. We had to separate folks. So as short-staffed as they were, they had to do that. And I was just so impressed. As I heard from groups around the city, the police came out to the park and broke us up. They were very polite to us. They gave us masks. They asked us to disperse, and we dispersed. The way DPD handled it was they approached people in a constructive way. They wrote some tickets for some people who persisted. But by and large, they got this city to mask up, to quarantine, and Detroit received national attention for the most rapid drop in COVID cases. Chief Craig got well, Chief Stair got well, and they returned to work. But it never, all I could think to myself was, James White could run any major police department in America. What he did under pressure was remarkable. And then, 3 months later, he left us for the state of Michigan. And he has been head of the State Civil Rights Commission. Governor Whitmer took him away and is the leading official in the state dealing with discrimination in every corner. He goes from community to community to write acts of discrimination. It's an extremely important and high-profile job. And so when we started out in this process, in addition to the people internally, first question I had was, could we get James White to consider coming back? Because aside from 24 years in the department, aside from 8 years as assistant chief, James White was the person who spearheaded the Detroit Police Department's compliance with the federal consent agreements on use of force. A huge part of the reason Detroit did not have issues like other cities last summer was because under Dennis Archer, the Justice Department came in and put the department under a whole new set of protocols on reporting use of force, on handling officer-involved shootings, on handling situations in lockups. And in 2014, the Justice Department certified us as being in full compliance and dismissed the court case. James White was the person who headed that effort. He's a big part of the reason that the Detroit Police Department has the relationship it has today. And in addition to that, in his spare time, he went and got a master's degree in counseling and is a licensed mental health therapist. A police chief, and I'm quite certain that he will be the only police chief in America who's got a counseling master's, who's a licensed mental health therapist, because he sees people, the citizens interact with, as needing help in ways more than law enforcement. And so as I talked to our outstanding candidates, and I talked to the members of the Board of Police Commissioners, they all said the same thing. I can't believe you could get James White to leave that great job at the state of Michigan to come back. But if you could do that, that would be remarkable. And so from here, the process is going to go forward. We are putting through procurement for a search committee that the Board of Police Commissioners will pick. Interim Chief White will compete in that process along with everybody else. He will be compared in that process against the best candidates that the board can come up with. And at the end of the day, he'll be measured on his performance. But if his future performance is anything like the rest of his career, we're going to be very, very proud. I think you're going to see this department unite behind him. And so effective June 1st, I want to introduce the new interim chief of police, James White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very, very happy to be here. Very humble listening to the mayor do my introduction. I was talking to my daughter the past few days, who's here, Jalen. Raise your hand, Jalen. It's my one and only best friend, daughter, you name it. And the funny thing is, you know, as we age, get older, the roles kind of reverse for us from child to adult. And I remember when she was a teenager and she would want to go to certain parties and hang out with certain people, and she would say, "Dad, can I go to this party, or can I do that, or can I do this, that, or the other?" And I'd ask her a series of questions, you know, well, why, who's going to be there, why would you want to do that now? And, you know, we'd had some rough teenage years, but we got through them, obviously. She's here today. But so when I told her that I wanted to consider this opportunity, it was very interesting what she did. She took me to a litany of questions. You know, why would you want to do that? I actually like watching the news with you now. You don't pick up the phone every time you see a news report and call communications and ask a bunch of questions. So I told her, I said, you know, you have a wonderful life, and you certainly have been privileged, and you don't know it. You're a University of Michigan student. You're in education. Still in school, by the way. You need to wrap that up. But I didn't have that. I grew up in Detroit, a very proud only son of a now deceased single parent. Had me at 16 years old. Not embarrassed by that at all. Very proud of her. She read to me every day, and my two sisters, and she did the very best that she could to raise me. But with her being young, my grandmother really was the person who took the role of mom for me as I grew up in the city. And we lived in this big house in a 1,200 block of Longfellow with 11 of her sisters and brothers. And, you know, that was my beginning. And it was rough coming up through that. Grandma later moved from there to a big house in Chicago. And then ultimately, her oldest son became a business owner, and bought a house, or was in the process of buying a house on Art and Park in the late 70s. And he was more like my dad. He was the oldest son and my dad, or the only thing I knew to be a dad at that time. And unfortunately, he was murdered in that house on Arden Park, right on the corner, in the 70s. And I remember when the police came to the house to tell my grandmother that her oldest son had been murdered. And she was babysitting me like she did so many times. And I was standing there, and a police officer walks in from homicide. I know that now. Didn't know that then. It was just a big, giant cop with a big hat on. And he tells my grandmother the horrible news, and she collapses to the floor. And she's screaming and crying. Well, you're a kid. You look at that, and you start crying. And this cop picks me up, and he's talking to my grandmother, and he's telling her about the tragedy, and it was actually 2 people killed in that house. And I didn't understand any of that. I just knew my grandmother was crying and something happened to my uncle. But that made that print in your brain that you can never stop thinking about or living. And, life changed for us at that point, and everything from that moment changed. We all moved away from that big house, and we all started doing different things, and my mother continued to do what she did in raising us. So when my daughter asked me, why would you want to come back, I thought about that. I thought about the fact that when I came to the Detroit Police Department, I barely had a high school education. A young kid working at Kmart Security Loss Prevention, and then went to Northland Security Police, and then ultimately ended up here. Isaiah McKinnon took a shot, took a gamble on this young kid from Detroit, didn't know me from anybody, and said, I'm going to give him a shot. I'm going to take a chance on him. And then a few years later, with 4 years on the job, Benny Napoleon took a chance on me and promoted me to sergeant with 4 years. Barely knew anything about the police department, one of the youngest sergeants. I think Dave LaValle may have beat me out on that, though. But he took a chance on me. A few years later, I meet a guy by the name of George Hall, who decides, you know what, I want more from you than you want from you, so you're going to come work for me on my chief staff. And I'm like, just leave me alone. I just want to be a detective. And he took a chance on me. And then fast forward to James Craig. And I'm hesitating on James Craig because I got to bet with my daughter that I can get through this with saying James Craig less than 50 times. If I lose, I got to buy her dinner. So I got 49 left. James Craig walks in the door from Hollywood, California, by way of Cincinnati, Ohio, had full autonomy to come in here and do what he needed to do to run this department. And he took a chance on this total stranger he met once in Cincinnati during a use of force conference. And he gave me a chance. So when we talk about why, I think about that. I think about the fact that with that 16-year-old mom, God rest her soul, I had to go to school. And I went to Wayne County Community College, and I got my 2-year degree in 8 short years. Ask me how. But I went to work, and I met these great officers who believed in me and supported me, and this detective that's in the room named Mark Young, who helped me in my career when I was a sergeant detective. Helped me be a detective because I didn't know what it was, but a cool way to wear your gun on the outside and a nice suit. So when you ask why, I think about Wayne County Community College. Then I think about the fact that they took a chance on me. And they said, you know what, we're going to give you a presidential scholarship because you got a 4.0 at Wayne County. I said, really? But we need you to keep working hard. Then I went to Wayne State, and I got my degree in sociology. And then I got another degree because, well, the mayor took a chance on me and sent me to the Mike Ilitch School of Business to get a business certificate, or a master's in business certificate in their program. And then ultimately I took a chance on myself, and I went to Central Michigan University and became a mental health counselor because of how I dealt with the loss and the tragic loss in my family, but also how I see the tragedy around our community and how people are struggling with trauma and the loss of people. It's just not natural and normal. So when you ask why I would leave this amazing job with the state, who paid me well and treated me better, I find myself at this moment in time because I said to myself, and I said this to my daughter, and you can verify it, I said, Detroit took a chance on me. And because of Detroit, I've been afforded opportunities that I never thought possible. I'm humbled by this opportunity. I'm just a kid from by way of one street to the next, Virginia Park, Asbury Park, we bounced around, Longfellow, Arden Park, and I find myself here, and it's because of my education. I got that because good sergeants and lieutenants allowed me to work certain hours or evenings or mornings so I can get my classes in. This city took a chance on me. Benny Napoleon took a chance on me. Isaiah McKenna took a chance on me. George Hall took a chance on me. James Craig took a chance on me. So here I am. If the city can take a chance on me, I'm going to take a chance on it. And I'm going to compete for this job. And I may not get it, but I assure you this, no one is going to outwork me. They may be smarter. They may be able to figure out crime a little bit better, but they're not going to outwork me. And I'm going to give you all my best. I'm going to give this community my best. I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can to earn the trust and respect of the men and women that do this amazing job day in and day out. The other thing I want to do is I want to take a couple minutes and thank a few people in no specific order, but I want to give my thanks to the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. At a time when you have to be courageous to select a law enforcement officer to lead the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, it was that commission that chose me. And I'm so humbled. And I couldn't have been there had I not done those things that we talked about earlier, had I not been able to work here in the Detroit Police Department and work here in this great city. I'm so very thankful to all of them, but I want to highlight two of them right out the back, and that is my commission chair, Stacy Clayton, who is very passionate about the work of equity in education, who is absolutely passionate about the work that we were able to do in minority and women-owned businesses and ensuring that there was equity involved in every one of those decisions. And that's some of the work that we were doing around the state. And that work continues to this day. And my vice chair, Zina El Hassan, who equally is passionate about the work of civil rights. And I was just so impressed with, I had 8 bosses, but those, and I'm impressed with all of them, but those 2 I work with the most. And I was just very impressed that they were always center focused and center on point on the issues of equity and inclusiveness throughout the state. Also want to take a moment and thank the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, the men and women that do over 2,000 investigations annually regarding issues of discrimination, workplace discrimination, sexual harassment, LGBTQ issues, you name it. It's just amazing at the work that they do, how impressed I was with them. And again, you know, these aren't people that you just walk into and they accept you right away. We did a lot of work early on. And, you know, I brought my Detroit style with me, so I did a restructuring and moved some folks around and hired a whole bunch of people. And I'm just very happy to say that it went very well. There was a few bumps early on, but we did a lot of good work. And they are uber focused right now on this issue of equity in education, which is a very powerful issue, as well as looking at social justice issues and how we can partner. And I intend to continue that relationship with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. We're also able to restructure, expand our diversity, equity, and inclusion unit, and hire recently as last week not only a LGBTQ liaison from in-house, but also we hired in the department a legislative liaison that's going to focus on the issues involving civil rights from a lawmaking perspective and ensure that the Michigan Department of Civil Rights is relevant and at the table going forward, or continue to be relevant and at the table going forward. So I'm getting a lot into the weeds of the work that I just came from, but I'm humbled by the fact that not only did I get the opportunity, and it's an amazing opportunity, but I'm also equally humbled that they chose me as their leader, and it's because of you all. It's not me. It's because of the city of Detroit. Like the mayor just said, he's getting calls right now from cities around this country, and the Chief Craig talked about it a lot. You know, and that's a testament to the chief's leadership, that's a testament to the mayor, but that's a testament to this town, that people want to take a chance on us. People want to give us an opportunity to lead. And for that, you all should be very proud, because there was a time not long ago when that was not necessarily the case. So we should all be proud when we see other people get these opportunities. And I also want to just take a moment and thank Governor Whitmer for really inviting me to the table on her cabinet meetings and reaching out to me personally, welcoming me to my new job, But that wasn't the last call. Making sure that I had the necessary resources that I needed, supporting the efforts. Governor Whitmer, and I'm not getting political here, that was what I did yesterday, so give me a minute. I'm not trying to be political, but she did, in fact, start a statewide diversity and inclusion mandate. So each state agency has a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's leadership. That's leading from the front. That's talking about diversity, not in an abstract, but in an absolute. And that's something that I'm going to be looking to implement here in the Detroit Police Department, is diversity, equity, and inclusion considerations in literally every decision that we make. And then Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who not only invites the department to the table on issues of equity and inclusion and racial division in the state, but again, reaching out to me and making sure that I had what I needed. And then when we invited him to a meeting, and a couple meetings that he's attended with and for the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, he's not watching his watch. He's there, and he's there to offer support. So I just want to thank them for this opportunity. Getting back to this city and what it means to me, I love this city. I love this department. Chief Craig, that's two, said, cops count, leadership matters, and that's a mantra that he lived by. And I want the officers, the men and women of this department, to know that I understand and appreciate them for the work that they do on a day in and day out basis. We're not hopping in these scout cars on afternoons, hopping runs in the city of Detroit, any precinct, fill in the blank. Summer's coming, and it's even harder then. So if you are hopping in and out of these scout cars day in and day out, you're already a hero. Know that you're going to be supported. Know that we understand the work that you're doing, and know that I'm going to do everything in my power as interim chief to ensure that you feel supported. Chief Craig spent 7 years pounding that into everybody in this organization with bars and stars that wore blue. And you had to prove that you could lead with the officers in mind before he chose you as a leader. I'm proud to say that he calls me the lone survivor because he came in with a broom, but he kept me, and I'm very, very proud of that. But trust and believe, it was because I showed him that my heart was with these officers. Now, we can't always say yes about everything, but we can certainly make sure that you know that we care about you. Benny Napoleon used to say, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And that is a mantra that he infused in this organization, and Chief Craig is cops count, leadership matters, and leadership does matter. And leadership matters so much that I recognize that I have to have a team to get this done, because it's not just about me. And looking at the leadership of this organization, as the mayor indicated, there's so many great leaders to choose from. But right out the gate, I recognize that, okay, I'm walking into my new old job. Chief Craig is leaving, and that's a hard act to follow. Now I find out that First Assistant Chief is leaving, and I said, okay, let me talk to my daughter again about this. But LaShonda Steer did amazing work in her time as a First Assistant Chief, and I recognize the importance of that role, that I'm going to need a number two to assist me to run this organization. And with that, one of the first acts that I'm going to do as interim chief is submit Todd Bettison's name to the Board of Police Commission for consideration for First Assistant Chief. So with that, Todd, why don't you come on up, say a few words.
Wow. That's all I can say. James White. I've been doing James White for the past 20 years. Phenomenal individual, phenomenal person. We competed over the years, and just one of the smartest people that I know. And what's so important about James White is he is one of the many folks that did support me, and we came up with the same bosses, and we had the same mentors. Benny Napoleon was a mentor of mine, Chief Craig, George Hall. It was so many others, but we have been there. David LaValle, one of my teammates as well, and I just have so much respect for James White, David LaValle, Chief Craig, LaShonda Steer, and for me to be selected, recommended to be the first assistant chief to follow LaShonda Steer, those are big footsteps to fill as well. She was phenomenal. She has always helped and supported. And she wasn't always out front, but when it comes to handling the business of the department, the business side of the house, she did a phenomenal job when it comes to just recruitment, getting folks to join this department. So I'm so pleased to be a part of this executive team, and I will support Chief White, and I'm just glad that he is accepted the opportunity to come back here, and he has my support. And when it comes to team, like Chief Craig used to always say, of course, everybody on the department knows cops count, leadership matter. But one of the things that he always said when he was interviewed, and everybody called him Hollywood, but when he was national or local, he would always say, it's not me. I have a team behind me. I have a phenomenal team. And the chief would always say that when folks would give him the credit. And he used to always say, Todd, it's important that I do that. And I'm pushing you all out in the media to do interviews as well. I'm not going to do all these interviews because the community has to see you all. They have to know it's not just me. I have a team. I thank you, Chief Craig, for pushing us out, for building us up. We will not let you down. And James White, I just want you to know, you got a phenomenal team behind you, and I will work relentlessly and tirelessly to support you. Thank you, brother.
Also, over the past few days, we've been talking about what the team looks like, and the number one focus is going to be crime. We have to get this crime situation under control in the city. It's the absolute number one thing that's on my mind day in and day out. And one of the things I like about Chief Craig, I can appreciate now, didn't necessarily appreciate it early on, was Chief Craig calls you at 2 o'clock in the morning like he calls you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with the same level of energy. He's just talking, and he can call you and say, well, I'm out to dinner, I'm at the movies. He continues to talk. There's only one other person that I know that can handle a Chief Craig conversation like that, and that's David LaValle, because he knows that we've got to get this crime under control. He's got a tremendous idea about the direction we want to go in. We've been talking about going heavy on traffic enforcement. I think the way that we're driving in the city needs to be brought under control. We've talked about some outside of the box ideas. We've also talked about the fact that people deserve to be able to walk down the street safely without being accosted. They deserve to be able to sit in their driveway, sit on their porch, and we want to get back there. We're not going to be able to do it overnight. We're going to need your help. We're going to need the community support, but we're going to need a crime plan too. And the crime plan that we're working on is going to be sensitive to our community, but it's going to be aggressive against those who try to violate the rights, and safety is a right of the members of our community. So with that, I'd like to introduce you with the number 2 person on my team as it relates to, and number 1 as it relates to crime enforcement. I guess he and I will be 1 and 1A, and that's David LaValle. Dave LaValle?
Thank you. I just first want to take an opportunity to congratulate James White. I, too, have known James for probably 20 years, worked with him, worked for him. He's been a great partner, and I think that we're very lucky that the mayor was able to bring him back from the state to lead the Detroit Police Department. So, James, congratulations. I also am committed to doing everything I can to not only support James in his efforts as chief, but to do whatever we can to try to reduce crime in the city of Detroit, make it a safer place to live, play, and work. Also want to take an opportunity to congratulate my partner, Todd Bettison, on his pending appointment to First Assistant Chief. Great teammates, great partners, and we're here for full support. Thank you.
All right. So I asked the 3 of them to take a little bit of time to talk about themselves, because with the loss of James Craig and LaShinda Stair, it's going to be a new period for the department. And it is going to be laser focused on getting these traffic violations, these speeders, these drifters under control, getting the violence under control. I know Kim Worthy in the U.S. Attorney's Office is very excited about the courts opening up, which is going to give us a whole range of strategies we did not have just a month or 2 ago, and you're going to be hearing a lot about that. All of this is possible because the mayor and the Board of Police Commissioners work together as a team. We share ideas with each other, we share opinions, we don't always agree, but we respect each other. And now it comes to the Board of Police Commissioners to do a professional and hopefully timely search to get from where we are today to a permanent chief. And with that, I'll turn it over to the chair of the Board of Police Commissioners, Willie Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm so excited. My career, when Chief White talked about going up the ladder, my career was police reform, starting in the rank and file and impacting the union. So I didn't take that career path, even though I finished as a lieutenant on the Troy Police Department. I just want to introduce my board. My vice chair, Annie Holt, is not with us. She's on vacation, very well-deserving vacation. My chair, Lisa Carter, is immediate past chair. We have worked together for the last 8 years, and we all know this dapper young man here, Commissioner Holly, from historic Little Rock Baptist Church. He gave me the history of how that name came about, and I can't forget that. And Martin Jones, and turning to my left, Darrell Brown, Willie Burton, William Davis, Lynn Bernard, Brother Hernandez. These are the 10 board members that are here. And it's very seldom that we all agree sometime, but I think we all agree that James E. White should be the interim police chief. I didn't talk to him directly, but I got a consensus because I didn't get no negative feedback. I want to say on behalf of the Board of Police Commissioner, we support Mayor Duggan's selection of James E. White as interim chief of the police of the city of Detroit. I'm just pleased that the mayor reached out to all the commissioners and we worked together. He didn't have to do that. The charter gave him that power to select the interim chief, but he wanted that input, and we are very fortunate. That's the type of mayor that we have in the city of Detroit. Mayor Duggan's appointment and interim police chief White ensures the department will continue to have very steady and capable leadership during this time that it takes the board and the city to go through the charter-mandated process for hiring a police chief. Throughout his career, especially during his year as assistant chief, Mr. White, interim police chief White, has worked closely with Chief Craig, involved in almost every aspect of police operation, policy, and administration. We know that because we have interacted with him in that 8 years that I've been on this board. I can speak personally to that. He has worked very well with this board. And it's been over the period of time as we changed board members, he has worked extremely well. He's always been consistent in terms of the dialogue and sincerity and his commitment. So I'm just pleased that he come back from Director of Michigan Department of Civil Rights. And I know that was a menial job because that is my career goal, would be civil rights in terms of, and when they selected you, I say they got it right. Notwithstanding his police background, because sometimes people think there's a stigma of being a police officer. And I tell people all the time, I am proud of my 32 years of this career. Now, and Chief White spoke about the men and women in the DPOA, LSA that do the work every day. We have to commend them. They work tireless for the city of Detroit, and we hope that one day they get a little bit more financial reward. But I know the mayor is working on it, council working on that, but they are deserving of that type of support, and we're going to give them that type of support. We expect the time selection will continue our drive to achieve in the city of Detroit with the DPD, with the city, and the resident. I said that when Chief Craig was leaving, that the bar is high for Chief to replace him. But I think we have exceeded that bar. We have exceeded that bar at this time. So I know he's going to do an outstanding job. We are excited to welcome him back, as I stated earlier. He and his executive team, we know the team well, real well. We have worked with them over the last 7, 8 years. So I know them personally and professionally that they are committed. They are out there in terms of doing the work, and that's leadership. I want to close by saying the men and women of the sworn officer and the civilian body, we are going to go forward. And with your support and blessing, we can make a difference. The mayor talked about crime. It's just not a police problem. It's just not DPD problem. It's just not the chief problem. It is all our problem. We have to really get a hold of what's going on in the city of Detroit. We need reform. We need people to act responsibly. I'm a city resident too for many, many years. Grew up in the city of Detroit, the old city of Detroit. Let's return to those days holding people accountable. You want to hold the department accountable. Well, we need to be accountable. I'm speaking for as a citizen in the city of Detroit. I just want to close by thanking you for coming back. I want to give you my first civilian salute. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this went a little bit longer than I thought, but we got about another 15 minutes for questions. We'll try to get through all of them, whoever would like to start. And Chief?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is to the mayor and perhaps to Willie Bell as well. Mr. White wants to compete for this permanent position. What do you both need to see from him for him to get that permanent position?
So he has a clear expectation of what needs to be done. I expect the department to be united. I expect it to have a clear strategy in reducing crime. I expect it to continue the tradition of treating all of our citizens with respect and have the same kind of integrity and openness that it has had for the last 8 years. That's what I'm looking for. I'll let the police commissioner speak for what they're looking for.
I think it's quite clear. The Interim Chief White has already outlined his career, his involvement in reference to the concern that we have. He's already indicated, it's been clearly spoken to, and that's what we expect. We expect nothing less of his work in the past, in the present, in the future. So that's our commitment, because he's demonstrated that. I don't see a change in that, and that's what we're looking at as a police chief in the city of Detroit.
Any other member of the Board of Police Commissioners like to comment on that?
I will. Hello, everyone. I'm Police Commissioner William Davis. I am also president of Detroit Chapter National Action Network. And I definitely expect and want to see a Herculean effort to do something about crime. Crime is at an all-time high in our city. People are afraid to walk the streets. We have people racing and drag racing and doing a whole bunch of stuff that they should not be doing. So I want to see a change. I don't know if he could do everything within the time that we got for him to be the interim chief, but I want to at least see a difference.
Okay. It's good to see you again, Chief White. You were chief when I was here. What I want to see actually is, I understand, police, of course, represent law enforcement, and we want to keep the law and keep the peace. You're essentially peace officers and safety officers for people in the community. But rather than just arrest people and lock them up, and I've spoken to the mayor about this as well, I'd like to see some proactive measures in order to address crime systemically. I don't want everybody to go to jail or be arrested or be a felon in the city of Detroit. I want to create programs and perhaps processes that would eliminate that so that they will not want to do criminal acts. And the biggest thing, of course, in Detroit right now are handguns and people with guns. So one of the things that I'd like to discuss with you after this is over is the possibility of having a gun forfeiture where people can turn in guns and get $200 or whatever it is we decide they get. No questions asked, no facial recognition, no nothing. Let's see if we can collect the weapons off the street and not just arrest people and give them a 2-year felony if they have a weapon. Maybe we could get it. And I think women and mothers and girlfriends and wives will help with this. I think if my son had a gun, I'd go get it, and I'd bring it to you and get the $200.
All right, so it sounds like Chief White has already got some job assignments and he hasn't even started. So you get a sense of the expectations of the police commissioners, which is what they should be.
And a question for Chief White, please. Chief, we got a statement a short time ago from Prosecutor Kim Worthy, and she says in part that you accept responsibility. You're not quick to blame. In your dealings with her, he has been very even-tempered and is simply about getting the work done. He is not a glory seeker. What's that mean to you?
It means to me that I'm well received. I I don't know how to really answer that other than the fact that my work will be demonstrated by the work I do in this organization and with these men and women, and I want to make sure that we partner with all of our crime-fighting partners around the state, not just in the city, this county, the state. We can't do this alone, and we can't arrest our way out of it either. So we have to make sure that we build bridges and have partners throughout the state. I'm humbled by those words, and I'm glad that the prosecutor, Madam Prosecutor, has received me in a way that is very positive for me and this organization.
Do you take that as a reference to the previous chief?
I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting into that at all, sir.
Good try, Joe. We're not starting the governor's campaign yet.
Congratulations, first of all, Chief. If you can indulge me, a couple questions. Do you plan on doing anything differently at all than the previous chief?
Well, sure. The worst thing you can do is try to be James Craig. I mean, James Craig is a once-in-a-lifetime chief for an agency that needed him at the time we got him. He was the right chief at the right time in the organization. I'll certainly take a lot of what he's instilled in me and taught me about leadership. He is really one of the smartest police minds I've ever had the privilege of working with. But I will do James White. I will not do James Craig. I will do the things that I think are necessary to move this organization forward, but informed by some of the very positive lessons I've learned under his leadership.
My second one, I have three if you don't mind. The second one is, how do you plan on implementing your mental health background? That's a big issue in Detroit, and you're counselor. I mean, how do you plan on using that in your position to make a change?
It absolutely informs everything I do from the moment my feet hit the floor. I've had the privilege under Chief Craig to implement a CIT program, community intervention training, and the mental health training involved. I won't get into all of that. There's a lot of positive pieces that comes out of that. I know when I left, we had 2 precincts that were online. I'll be talking to Todd and Dave later to see if we went citywide with that yet. That's something that I want to do. That's fantastic for the community, fantastic for our police officers. But then the other piece is I want to make sure that we're keeping our good cops good. We want to make sure that we support them and that we give them the necessary mental health training that they need, and that we take the stigma away from mental health training. And we celebrate people who seek those services. When you look at what these cops deal with day in and day out, my daughter teases me about watching the news so much, and she goes, "Oh, Dad, that stuff is so horrific. How do you watch this all day long?" Well, we're watching it, and she can barely watch it. These officers are living it. They go out on these runs every day. They see these rollovers, these babies, trapped in vehicles. They then pull the babies out of the car and rush them to the hospital. And, for all their work, they get to do it all over again tomorrow. And what are we doing for them? How do they decompress? How do they emote? How do they talk to someone about the traumas that they're dealing with? And the problem with trauma is trauma makes you fearful of trauma. So once you deal with trauma, you're fearful of trauma, and then you develop PTSD from the trauma you've been exposed to. So we need to support our cops. We need to help them, but I'm absolutely going to be pushing for grant funding. It is my hopes that we could, get a counselor in every precinct where officers can privately go talk about what they just experienced. And Chief Craig brought in peer support. Let me tell you something. Didn't know what it was when he mentioned it. It is an absolute necessity. The team is phenomenal, and we're going to continue to expand and support that. And they should hear from me right now. That goes nowhere. In fact, that's going to be enhanced. So that's how I'm going to do it.
And my final question, sir, you spent years as a cop, right? And you had for a few months, an outsider view, as the civil rights. Did you learn anything different, from not being a cop, being outside of the agency? What did you learn during your time as head of the civil rights about policing, seeing it from another angle,
Well, that's a great question, and it is, this is a time in American history that we can never forget. In the past 4 years prior to the tragic murder of George Floyd, people were really kind of showing who they really are. And we can't unsee it, and we can't forget what we've seen. But I think we need to take this snapshot in time and not dismiss it as a moment in time, but learn from it and build from it. I've had the privilege of traveling the state and talking about issues of social justice and reform and policing. And because I couldn't get past good morning without people saying, you were an assistant chief. Let's talk about it. And here's what I'll tell you. Two things can be true at the same time. You can have reform. You can have supportive police officers. You can support good cops. You can stand behind good policing measures. Officers are troubled by some of the things that we've seen in this country, and want to be heard. And so what I say to you is, what I've seen is that when you take an agency like Detroit, who spent 11 years in a consent judgment, who has great, fantastic relationships with its community, is it perfect? No, it's not. We can do better. We can always do better. But we are truly a model of community policing excellence. Neighborhood police officers and what they are doing. You look at, and I'm not going to call any names because I'll miss a couple, but I'll talk about one at number 8, who takes his police car, brand new police car. I saw on Facebook the chief gave him a new car not long ago. So now I'm going to be getting calls for them to all get new cars. But he took his car out, and I thought it was fascinating. He parks his car, and a couple citizens walk up to the car and they want to see inside it. And some people might say, well, that's nothing. It is something, because there are people in this community, and communities of color, and communities that don't necessarily get that type of interaction with the police. Some people have only seen the inside of a police car when they're having a really bad day. Well, here's a time when a person can look inside the police car, interact with a police officer in a very positive way, and then move on. Let's talk about the MPO at number 11, what he's doing. And there's many more, but I'm just talking about these two. Polar opposite sides of the town. You've got number 11, number 8. Number 11, the work that they're doing, their reach is different. It's supporting youth. It's bringing in people to talk about community engagement programming. So what I've learned to your question is that there's an opportunity here that we can't miss, trying to get past the moment. You know, oh, well, that happened last year. No. What happened with George Floyd, what happened in this country cannot be forgotten. What's happening in policing and some of the issues in policing are real, but two things can be true. We can still support fantastic police officers like we have here in the Detroit Police Department. We can support them, we can engage them, we can keep them well trained, we can give them mental health support, and we can make sure that we're here when they need us, and we stand with them. You know, I'm on my about 10th James Craig. So James Craig says that when bad things happen, okay, and they will, and I'm going to quote him, bad things happen and they will, get in front of them, you tell the truth, and you make the necessary immediate changes so those bad things don't happen again. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Mayor, maybe this one's for you. As an outsider sitting here, congratulations, by the way, Mr. White. He leaves a job in state government. He's got police board of commissioners here present, one saying he meets the bar. It seems like the process of looking for other candidates perhaps is a foregone conclusion. I'm just
Again,
curious for the...
I don't see it that way at all. I don't know.
All right?
No, as far as I'm concerned, and
I don't mean that in a negative way, but I
and
mean...
Chief White understands.
Right.
He is going to be compared against the best applicants we get from around the state or around the country. That's what they're going to do in their process. But if he comes in and unifies this department and starts to make an impact, he's going to be an extremely strong, permanent candidate. But they are hiring a search firm, and he will be matched up against the best talent from everywhere. And are you guys telling me, isn't that how we're doing it? Yes, absolutely. Right.
Does he have your endorsement at this time? Or-
Again, he has my support
Right.
as the interim chief. He's got his 2 assistant chiefs' endorsement, which is probably more important than mine, because they are going to hit this thing as a team, and this is an extraordinary team, but he's got to go compete. And so, like everybody who works for me knows, you're competing for your job every day. And we're very fortunate in the city to have a lot of really talented people who are happy to go do it every day, and now James White is one of those who understands. And, the reality is, even after the selection, you still serve at the pleasure of the mayor. So your performance is measured every day. He's been under a fair amount of pressure from me in the past, and my guess is he'll handle it just fine.
Thank you.
Anything else, John?
Yeah, I have one question from Dana Afana from the Detroit Free Press. She's asking about Deputy Chief Elaine Bryant. It's been reported that she's in consideration down in Columbus and wanted to know if you may be trying to keep her.
Again, I'm not going to talk about personnel. I don't think a month goes by that one of our top staff has not been recruited by another city department. In fact, there was a day when a fellow by the name of White thought he was going to be the police chief in Ann Arbor before I talked about it. So it is an every week occurrence that police departments across the country make offers to our staff. We don't comment on any of them.
Okay, thank you, that's it.
All right?
I think you addressed this a week ago. What's the timetable on this now for the search and police commissioners and so on? Is there an approximate timetable?
We don't know approximately. It's up to the search firm. They're going to reach out to candidates all over the USA. And we would only see the tops candidate, maybe 10 or 12, that might surface. But the time frame it could be 2 months or 3 months. We don't really know until we get their advice in terms of how the search is going. And I think the search has already started because people have been bombarded with me. I said, apply with the search form. And then we now should know the search form as soon as possible. That answer your question?
You haven't picked the search firm yet?
Yes, we're in the process of completing that task. Yes, we have.
Okay.
I expect that we'll have a search firm. They're having to defer because it has to go through the city procurement process, which is working hand in glove with the Board of Police Commissioners. But I expect we'll have a search firm selected in the next week or so. And certainly I would hope they could do the process professionally in 2 to 3 months. And I think that's the hope, but ultimately the Board of Police Commissioners will decide based on how it's going. All right, and thank you all very much for being here. And this isn't the last time you'll hear from Chief White.